bodice. Before draping the bodice, so let's go over the components of the dress form. We have here the center front of the dress form, the princess seam, the waist level. In this tutorial, I'm going to use the top of the waistband as the reference point for the waistline. If you use the bottom of the waistband, that's okay, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm using the top of the waistband as the reference point for the waistline. Okay, point on the bust is called the apex, and the horizontal level on the apex is called the apex level or the apex line. Okay, keep that in mind. The side seam, the princess seam at the back, and the center back. Once again, I'm using the top of the waistband as the reference point for the waistline. Also, I'm draping from the front, I'm draping on the right side of the dress form, and on the back, I'm draping on the left side of the dress form. All right, let's get started. Grab your muslin. And once again, this is the center front of my dress form. On my muslin, the folded edge is the center front line. This is the bust level, the horizontal line that goes across. That's the bust level on my muslin, okay? So what I need to do now is align the center front onto the center front of the dress form, and then also align the bust level onto the bust level of the dress form. So let's do that. My bust level is right here. It's the highest point where the apex is, and placing my muslin onto the dress form, aligning the apex level onto the apex level of the dress form as well. Okay, so there we go. And then also, this is the apex line. It should match exactly where the princess seam is. Okay, so let's go ahead and pin down the center front. Place 2 pins at the top, at the bottom of the neckline, and then just continue to align at the center front and pin all the way down to the waistline. Once again, I'm stopping at the top of the waistband. I'm using the top of the waistband as my reference point for the waistline. And I'm gonna put 2 pins just to anchor everything in place. And I'll place 1 more pin right here at the center front. Then next, what I need to do is smooth over the muslin so that it's nice and neat over the front area. And once again, this apex line should be exactly onto the apex of the bust where the princess seam is. My princess seam line is right here. So pretty much this apex line is where the apex and the princess seam line meets on the dress form. Okay, this should be parallel to the ceiling or the floor. Place 2 pins to anchor the bust into place. Okay, next I need to do the neckline. So what I'm going to do is cut along the muslin and match it along the shape of the neckline. To do that, it's really simple, really easy. Grab your scissors, cut across. Usually I like to leave about like 1.5 inches to 2 inches at the top. So cut across about 1 inch, and then cut down to the neckline. So I'm cutting down to the neckline and stop at the neckline. Then smooth the muslin over and pin. And then pin. So as you do this, you want to smooth the muslin along the way. So once again, cut across, and cut down to the waistline. To the neckline. And I'm going to keep doing this until I get to the shoulder seam at the top of the shoulder. Then I can place my pin. Once again, cut across, then cut down to the neckline. Cutting down releases the fabric so that it fits along the curve of the neckline. And I'm stopping when I reach the neckline. Awesome. And as I do this, once again, I'm smoothing the muslin over the shoulder of the dress form. So I'm pretty much done with the neck. This area is pretty much done. It's nice and smooth. I have pinned over the neck. Okay, so here's a close-up of what it is I just did. Here's the neckline, right? And I stopped at the shoulder. Here's my shoulder seam right here. You can kind of see it through the muslin. Here's my shoulder seam. So I traveled along the shape of the neckline, cut across, cut down, stopping at the neckline, cut across, cut down. And each time I did that, I pinned. And then I stopped at the shoulder seam, pretty much where the neckline meets the shoulder seam. Okay, let's continue. So now we've draped the neckline and drape the muslin over the shoulder. Let's go ahead and add a little pin. We'll add one pin right at the edge of where the armhole is and where the shoulder, pretty much where the shoulder line meets the armhole. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin right here. Also, at the point between the shoulder seam at the armhole and at the bottom of the armhole, I would say almost at the midway point between these 2 points, pinch the muslin just a little bit, just a little pinch, and add 2 pins to hold it in place. This little pinch is to add ease into your bodice when you sew it. So this is just a little bit of ease right here at the armhole, okay? And if you wanted to measure down from your shoulder seam, you can come down about, like, I don't know, 3 inches, 3.5, but pretty much it's, it's the distance, almost a quarter of the distance from the armhole, from the shoulder seam at the armhole to the bottom of the armhole, okay? Just add a little pinch just to add some ease up into the chest area, all right? Now, on the side of the dress form, smooth the muslin down, all right? Make some room, smooth down the muslin, and then pin down the side seam, okay? So go ahead and pin down the side seam. I usually like to start about 1 inch below the armhole. So my armhole ends about right here, and I'm going to just come down. And I'm pinning into the side seam. I'm pinning from the armhole down to the top of the waistband, which is my waistline. Please do not skip steps. Pin from underneath the armhole all the way down to the waistband, okay? Do not just stop in midway. Pin all the way down to the waistband. All right, so now we're almost done draping the front. I have my center front aligned, my bust level aligned. I draped along the neckline, smoothed the muslin over the shoulder, did a little bit of a pinch over here to add ease at the chest, draped down my side seam. Notice how I kept this nice and smooth. Now I have all this fabric. I'm going to place it into one dart underneath. I would say one dart exactly where the princess seam is, okay? So once again, all of this is going to be made into one dart. Before I do that though, I need to first mark the location of the princess seam. All right, grab your marking pencil and smooth the muslin from the center front over to the princess seam, okay? And gotta find my princess seam is right here. I'm smoothing the muslin over to that point, and then I'm marking exactly where the princess seam meets the waistline. Okay, so this is my princess seam right here, and I'm marking exactly where the princess seam meets the waistline, and then on the bottom of it, I'm just going to mark the area where the waistline is. So it's kind of like an upside down T, right? I did a mark where the princess seam is, and then I marked the bottom where the princess seam meets the waistline. All right, so that's the first marking. Then get your scissors, and what we need to do now is drape the muslin along the waistline. So to release the fabric, you can measure down or just guesstimate. Is guesstimate a word? Yeah, we're going to use that. We're going to estimate about 1 inch down from the bottom of your waistline. So my waistline is right here. I'm going to come down about 1 inch from that area, cut across, and then cut up to my waistline. In this case, I'm stopping a little bit below the waistline and then pin. Kind of like what we did with the neckline, but it's a little bit different in the sense of this time we're doing it on the waistline. Cut across, cut up, and just in case, I don't want to make any mistakes. So instead of coming all the way up to the waistline, to the top of the waistband, I'm stopping at the bottom of the waistband because I don't want to cut past that point. Okay. You can cut up to that point, but you just have to be careful because you don't want to cut past this point at the waistline. So I'm going to do this until I get to the princess seam. Okay. Once again, add a pin. And I'm pinning exactly into the waistline, which is at the top of the waistband. So once again, cut across. And I try to not go past the princess seam. My princess seam is about right here. So when I'm cutting, I don't want to cut past the princess seam. Not yet anyway. And then I'm going to cut up to the waistband and then smooth the muslin across. Notice that when you cut up to the waistband, it releases the muslin so you're able to smooth the muslin across, okay? So please do not be afraid to cut. You need to cut for this to work. If you don't cut your muslin, it's going to be hard to drape it. Okay, so once again, I'm almost up. Yep, I'm almost to my princess seam. So I'm cutting across, and then I'm cutting up to my waistband. And yep, my princess seam is right here. So then temporarily place the pin. I might have to move that just to hold things in place. Then get your fabric marker or pencil and mark the location where the princess seam meets the waistline. So my princess seam is exactly right here. And let me move this pin out of the way. That was just to hold things down temporarily. And once again, here's my princess seam. Here's my waistline. And I'm marking exactly where the princess seam meets the waistline. So this vertical line is my princess seam. The horizontal line at the bottom is where the princess seam meets the waistline. Okay, so here's the deal. I have a marking here and I have a marking right here. So now I want to fold this dart. To do that, what I want to do is push all of the excess fabric so that this marking, which is the marking, the first dart leg marking near the princess, from the princess seam to the center front, I want to push all of the excess fabric so that this marking is on the top of the fold. So I'm going to do this, push all of the excess fabric towards the center front and keep pushing until I can get this marking on top of a fold like that. See, now this is a fold and this marking is right at the top of the fold. Okay, push everything in as best as I possibly can. You know, this is a very large dart, so if you can't get all of the fabric in there, don't worry about it. Get it just in there as best as you possibly can. So notice how I'm pushing the excess fabric towards the center front, and as I'm doing this, I'm making sure that the muslin folds and that this dart leg is at the top of the fold like that, as best as I possibly can. Okay, then I'm gonna bring this dart leg to meet the second dart leg to close the fold like that. See that? I'll do that one more time. Push everything in as best as I possibly can, and then bring this dart leg to meet the other dart leg. Boom, like that. Okay? And as I'm doing this, I'm going to keep pushing the excess fabric into the fold as best as I possibly can. And now I can pin. So I want the dart to actually start from the princess seam, from this point right here. So I'm going to keep, like, you know, manipulating everything so that it extends from that seam, and I fold down and I match everything up. Awesome. Do this as best as you possibly can. And I lost my pen cushion. Found it. Push everything in there. And then match so that you can close it at the waist. And pin. And then I'm just going to pin up the dart as best as I possibly can. And I'm going to pin until I reach the apex. So this dart is a 1 dart bodice. All of the darts, all of the excess fabric is going to be folded into 1 dart. And it's this dart right here, extending from the apex down to the waistline. Then I can cut off the excess fabric at the waist. After I close up my darts, I can cut off the excess fabric at the waist. Awesome. And I'm just going to cut into it to release it a little bit more. Once again, I'm stopping at the bottom of the waistline. Let's trim this a little bit more. Keep your work as neat as possible. And we're almost done. So now that I've done this, you're still going to have a little bit of fabric over here because we try to push everything into 1 dart. And, you know, the bust, especially if you have a fuller size, I'm using a size 10. If you have a bustier dress form, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to get all of the fabric into 1 dart at the bust. But if you find that you have like a little bit of excess fabric here, you can kind of smooth it out at the side seam. So I'm going to temporarily remove these pins from the side and just smooth out the excess fabric that are right here, that is right here out towards the side seam. So let's try that. Maybe it'll help a bit. And this is for those who have like really bustier dress forms. You can do that to kind of get rid of the excess fabric that's like sitting right here. You may not be able to get rid of all of it, but don't worry about that. That could be actually used as ease. Okay, so now that I smooth everything out at the side, I'm going to repin it again. Starting from the bottom of the armhole all the way down to the top of the waistband, where the side seam meets the waistline. Okay, I'm done with the front drape. I'm happy with what I see. Now all I have to do is go ahead, add my markings, and trim down the muslin on the front to make space for me to drape the back. Okay. All right, awesome. Get your marking pencil and then mark along the waist. I keep calling the neckline the waistline. Mark along your neckline. I'm using these little dots to mark along the neckline. And then mark on the shoulder seam. Stop at where the shoulder seam meets the armhole, and then place one marking at the top where the shoulder seam meets the armhole, and then place a marking exactly where you have that ease. And then at the bottom of your armhole, once again, I like to go down about 1 inch from the armhole plate and then place a mark. Then mark down the side on the side seam. Once again, I like to use these little dots. To me, it's neater, whatever works for you. Then mark your waistline. Once again, I'm marking at the top of my waistband. I'm using the top of my waistband as my point of reference. Oops, I made a mistake there. This is the top, not this one. Okay. All right. Once again, before you move on to the back, make sure you have all of your markings. I have, of course, the first marking was the bust apex. That's already there. I have my markings at the neckline, have my markings at the shoulder seam, one where the shoulder seam meets the armhole, one where we added the ease, and another where we came down about 1 inch from the plate. We probably might open up the armhole a little bit more when we're tracing the muslin onto paper. And we'll shape out the armhole actually on the pattern paper. So all you need to shape up the armhole is the marking at the top, the marking at the ease area, and the marking at the bottom. But just in case, though, I am going to just put one more marking right here just to have it as a guide. And then pretty much that's like 1 inch away from the plate. Okay, that's about it. So now, because I need to drape the back, I'm going to cut off the excess muslin. At the side seam, please cut 1 inch away from your markings for the side seam. Do not cut exactly on the markings for the side seam. Once again, I'm cutting 1 inch, about 1 inch away from those markings, right? Because you need to have some excess fabric just in case if you make a mistake, or if you need to extend something. So notice this is about 1 inch away from the side seam. Do not cut exactly on the side seam. Okay, and then at the armhole, I'm gonna cut about 1 inch away from these markings that I created. So once again, if you want to measure it out, you can. I'm just estimating, or my new word, guesstimating, how much to cut from the markings I created. Okay, do not cut on the markings. You still want to have some excess fabric to work with. Then at the shoulder seam, the same concept. I'm going to cut about 1 inch away from the markings that I did on the shoulder seam, right? Because I don't want all this excess fabric hanging, especially being that I need to drape the back. Okay, we're done with the front. Okay, so I'm doing a little bit of a close-up for the front so you can see my markings. There's the dart. If you come in closer to the waist, those are the markings for the waist. And I have my markings for the side seam. And let's take a closer look at what's happening at the shoulder. Once again, there's my markings along the neckline. And here's the shoulder. Here's that marking at the area where the shoulder meets the armhole. And then you have that one little bit of a marking at the area where the ease is. And then when you come down, I added another marking right here, which is about 1 inch away from the plate. And then at the side seam, I came down about a little bit. It looks like a little bit more than 1 inch, but I came down about 1 inch from the armhole plate. And these are all of the markings that you need to have before you even think of taking your garment off your muslin off the dress form at the front.